My name's Dan Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of the Tax Revolution Institute, and I'm going to do something you probably won't see too often at Students for Liberty. I'm actually going to act as a representative of your government today, and I'm going to thank you for everything that you voluntarily put into our tax system. So, not only did you create the expansive tax code that Young Americans for Liberty put out there, but local government, you gave them $1.32 trillion as probably some of the most generous people on the planet. State government, $1.94 trillion. Federal government, $3.27 trillion. But we aren't done. Not only did you willingly give your government, but you value those pieces of paper out there that represent the tax code so much, you paid another $1 trillion in compliance costs to accountants and in lost economic opportunity just so you could have those pieces of paper. You all are really nice people. So that's about $7.5 trillion. You do the numbers on that. 50.71% of your income on average goes to any level of government through taxation. And since I'm not pretty enough, I brought Chloe, our friendly neighborhood IRS agent, to tell you a little bit of what your taxes paid for and how you really helped out America and the economy with your taxation. Let's talk about education. You have tripled your donations to our education funding since 1970, and our test scores have gone absolutely nowhere. Thank you very much. 24th in literacy, 25th in science, 40th in math, and 14th in education. What about the poor? Does anyone in here have a $10 bill? I need a $10 bill from someone in the audience. $10 Federal Reserve note, since I know where I'm talking. All right, we have a $10 bill. Thank you very much, sir. All right, so this $10 bill goes through the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program, what we all classically know as welfare. This is cash to cash. All right, cash to cash program might have a little bit of administrative overhead. Of this $10 bill, how much of it do you think actually goes to a poor person? Let's take some guesses. Throw some hands up.
10 cents.
10 cents, probably a little higher than that. 13 cents. Okay, a little higher than that. Go ahead. What?
$10 bill?
Yeah, out of $10 bill. $6, way lower.
$3.
Pretty close, $3. It's $2.60 out of this $10, direct cash to cash, goes straight to government coffers without helping a poor person. Thank you very much, sir. All right, so what does this lead to? About 1 in 5 American children are living in poverty thanks to you. About 13.5% of Americans live in poverty. You know, when they told me libertarians hate poor people, I didn't quite realize what that meant, but thank you very much. What about national defense? A study by the Defense Business Board last year, which DoD tried to crumble, said that they were wasting $125 billion a year on bureaucracy. Only bureaucracy and administration at DoD, and that's about how much it could have paid for if they used it in a different way. What about veterans care? Last year, a couple years ago, there was a veterans scandal. They found almost 307,000 veterans died waiting for medical care. FDA-approved drugs, not including what the FDA didn't approve that could have saved lives, only FDA-approved drugs, treatments, and etc. killed 789,000 people in the past 10 years. What about housing? Oh, thanks to your voluntary donations, 500,000 people go without a home, of which almost half of them are in families. And seriously, guys, who would build the roads? Well, it turns out that your tax dollars went to building those roads, but they sure as heck didn't go to maintaining them. 49% of all U.S. roads are in moderate or poor condition. 25.6% of our bridges are structurally obsolete. Think about that next time you cross the Grand Canyon. All right, what has that gotten us for our environment? About 121 million Americans live under polluted air. 18 million Americans live in cities with potentially contaminated water like Flint, Michigan. And let's say that a government agency, say, responsible for protecting the environment, I don't know, screws up the environment by dumping toxic waste in a river. Well, the EPA did that last year, and they just came out and said, thanks to your tax dollars and the Federal Tort Claims Act, you can't even sue us. Enjoy your new Yellow River. Now, we wrap all of this up, and of course we have a representative government, representative democracy, representative republic, however you want to put it. So obviously all of your tax dollars went to making our government accountable, right? Well, according to a Princeton University study that looked from 1945 onward, does the government represent the people? Here's what they said, and I'm going to quote the study directly here from Represent Us. The preferences of the average American appear to have only a minuscule, near zero, statistically non-significant impact upon public policy. Thank you very much. That would be taxation without representation. Now, why do I thank you so much for everything you voluntarily gave to this tax system? Well, because they said...
That's a word euphemism we use. We use voluntary compliance when we talk about traffic signals. Most people, at 2 o'clock in the morning, do you stop at a red light?
Yeah.
Is there a cop there?
Sometimes I don't.
Well, I do, and most of us do. Most of us do.
Right.
But that's voluntary compliance.
It's a voluntary system of payment of our taxes. Agreed.
I don't think we force people.
Taxation is not forceful?
Well, no.
It's voluntary?
In fact, quite to the contrary. Our system of government is a voluntary tax system.
Oh, if you don't want to pay your taxes, you don't have to?
Oh, of course you have to pay your taxes.
It's probably ultimately damaging to the sense of voluntary compliance, which underlies our entire tax system.
It is not an act of against someone's will, because people are voting for people in office, establishing a government, giving that government power to self-govern and to do things that the public needs. So in that sense, it's very much a voluntary act.
So, well, Wesley Snipes should have known that, because he voluntarily chose not to file his taxes and he voluntarily went to jail. All right, so now that we've had a little fun and taken a little time to dismantle this idea that our tax system is actually voluntary, what would that make the tax system? Well, that would make it coercive. According to the IRS website, although Treasury regulations establish voluntary compliance as the general method of income tax collection, Congress gave the Secretary of the Treasury the power to enforce the income tax through involuntary collection. At its heart, it is a coercive system. What does this mean? This means the government never has to earn your money. That they will get as much money as they want this year, and you'll give them the exact same amount of money next year. It's like if you walked into a restaurant one day and you ordered a salad and there were maggots in it. And you go to the waiter and you're like, "Please, sir, there's maggots in my salad." And he goes, "Oh my God, sir, I'll throw it out." And you're like, "Throw it out? I want a refund." He's like, "No, sir, we actually don't offer refunds. We're happy to throw out your salad, but you'll be back next week or you'll go to jail." That's what the tax system looks like. All right, so if government doesn't have to earn our money, who does? And this is a really important point. Most human welfare is not funded by taxation. And I don't mean welfare like dollar to dollar. I mean welfare in the food stamps, in the providing for human needs. I mean welfare in what do we as a society need to move forward. Most of that is not actually provided by the government, and it's not funded by taxation. So, give you a couple examples. We know that in this country today, we have a police shooting problem. We have over 1,000 people every year who are killed by officers of the law, whether it's in a dangerous situation or whether they were unarmed. I'm not commenting on, but we kill over 1,000 people in this country. Germany, Iceland, they sometimes kill 1 to 3 people a decade. Well, there's this organization, this company called the Detroit Threat Management Center. Who's familiar with the Detroit Threat Management Center? Anybody? A couple people. All right, so the Detroit Threat Management Center, they have a 20-year history and 40 facilitators. They don't call them officers, they call them facilitators. They operate in the roughest neighborhoods of Detroit. And they've fatally shot only one person in 20 years. And that was after he shot 2 of their facilitators. This is not funded by your tax dollars. Christian healthcare ministries. We know there's a big Obamacare debate going on right now. And there's a legitimate question your friends on the left will ask you that you should have an answer for. So if you repeal Obamacare, where do I go? Is the free market going to take care of it? Well, what does it sound like to someone on the left when you say, oh, well, the free market's going to take care of it? Here's what it sounds like. Oh, you're going to replace my health care with magic? Wow, that's amazing. So point them to a real example. Christian Healthcare Ministries has been around since 1981. Their plans cost about half the price of healthcare marketplace plans under Obamacare. They have 279,000 members. They've covered over $1 billion in medical bills. Why do they work? Because they're a co-op. You pay in, like insurance, it goes into a bank account, and because they're willing to pay hospitals cash, hospitals drop the price of all of their services so that they can give you the low price that you get at Christian Healthcare Ministries. Let me give you another one. Now, a lot of people I'm sure here know of Praxis, right? Okay, their marketing needs a little work. You should check out Praxis. Praxis, unlike college tuition, the average college student is going to graduate with $35,000 in debt over 4 years. Praxis, on the other hand, is a 9-month program. Tuition costs $12,000. It's covered by a $14,000 apprenticeship. If you get into Praxis, your tuition essentially costs nothing. You have to work extremely hard as an intense program, but 98% of Praxis graduates have jobs. That is higher by about 3 or 4 factors than any university in the country. They have an average salary of $50,000 a year. So those are some examples. But what are the broad categories that help people, that provide for human welfare outside of the government? Well, one broad category is for-profits. The overwhelming majority of the products and services you use every single day, no matter what your political persuasion, are provided by for-profits. The electricity in your home, the communication device you most definitely just sent a tweet out on. What happens when a for-profit is not taking over a vital human need? Anybody know what's going on in Venezuela right now? A couple of you? In Venezuela, the government runs the grocery stores. There is no food on the shelves. That's what happens when the for-profit, you don't even think about how much for-profits make sure that almost no one in America goes hungry. Just by lowering the price of food and making sure you have a choice in what to eat tomorrow. For-profits provide for a lot of human needs. A couple of examples of for-profits. Take a guess as to how much Amtrak, which is obviously a vital need, like the basic human needs actually go food, water, shelter, medical supplies, train travel. Amtrak, guess how much Amtrak costs us as taxpayers every single year, roughly? Throw out a number.
Building.
A little lower than that. Man, you guys are skeptics.
800 million.
What?
800 million.
300 million. That is exactly what they cost to the government last year. They cost the government $200 million before, and $200 million was the least they cost to the government. And they charge for tickets. It's not like you get a free ticket on Amtrak. They charge for tickets, and the least they cost the government in the past 10 years was $200 million. Alaska Railroad turns a $9 million profit, just like that. CSC Corporations, Command Security Corporation. I'm sure all of you went through our favorite government employee line, the TSA checkpoint, on your way here, right? Well, the TSA has been so terrible that they were started to be replaced in airports such as San Francisco by Command Security Corporation. The TSA spends about 50% of the money you give it actually serving people. The other goes to administrative and overhead and big couches for the managers. Command Security Corporation spends over 70%, 80%. Okay, so when the free market can't take care of someone, who does? Oh, it's nonprofits. Nonprofit is when no one makes a profit, and it's measured by the good it does in the community instead of by the profit the shareholders make. Not only do they provide a lot of the services government does already, and there's a guy from Push the Button here, if you could raise your hand somewhere. Okay, guy from Push the Button, they're categorizing a lot of various alternatives to government services that you need to know about in order to convince people empirically and with data that the free market and nonprofits and others can do a better job providing human welfare than government. Check them out. They provide a lot of the services government does already, and that's proven by government actually contracts with nonprofits a lot. Government doesn't provide all of the services. For example, Children's Home Society of Florida. Child Protective Services is probably one of the scariest names you can say in a room full of parents. Because without a warrant and without much judicial overview, they can take your kids from you. Well, the CPS in Florida knows its mission really well, so it sticks only to the taking kids part. And the rest of it, the counseling and the helping broken families and things like that, it actually contracts with the Children's Home Society of Florida for that. Why not cut the middleman out? Why does the dollar have to go through the government? Why can't it just go directly to the nonprofit? What about Feeding America? The food stamp program in America costs $1.40 per meal for the taxpayer. That seems pretty reasonable. Wow, we're getting people meals for $1.40. Yet Feeding America, which is the largest conglomeration of food banks in the United States, guarantees that for every dollar you give them, they'll give out 11 meals. Now that's a factorial. Even if I'm a skeptic, and I am, and I say, oh no, that's $1 for every 5 meals, that's still 6 or 7 times more efficient than the government. No philosophy needed. All hands volunteers. So FEMA dedicates about 50%. This is getting to be a trend with government agencies. About 50% of the money you give them actually goes to serving people. But they dedicate about 50% of their funds to actually helping disaster relief. All hands volunteers, 90%. Kiva. Now, most welfare is I give you money, and then I hope you eventually get a job and you don't have to rely on that money or rely on that food or rely on that assistance anymore. Kiva takes a different approach. With Kiva, you lend money to someone in need around the world and in the United States, and you help them get back on their feet. Kiva has lended $940 million in 10 years with a 97% repayment rate. What does that mean? That means they're getting those people out of poverty. They're getting people into entrepreneurship. This idea of microfinance won the Nobel Prize, which of course the Peace Prize doesn't mean anything, but won the Nobel Peace Prize for getting people out of poverty. That's Kiva. What about co-ops? Was it interesting to co-op in a nonprofit? Well, a nonprofit, you're the donor or you're the receiver. With a co-op, you're both the donor and the receiver, like Christian healthcare ministries, where you pay in when you can and you take it out when you need a medical expense. In fact, most insurance in the United States was provided by co-ops, where you joined a lodge or you joined a local society, and they paid for your medical bills with the membership fees that you put in. Another great example, we have a lot of food co-ops today. You bring food to the table, other people bring food to the table, people choose when they are able to take that food, and they're able to share food with their community without the help of the government. And then individuals and informal groups. Who all has seen Sully recently? A few of you. The hands are getting sheepish as we go along. Sully, not only being a great movie, Sully highlighted that in 7 minutes, without any formal organization, with very little government support and assistance, a ferry captain and 1,200 New Yorkers came together to save the people on that plane. Because although Sully landed the plane in the river, that plane was going down in hypothermic waters, which means those people were going to freeze to death after just surviving an airplane crash. Talk about a bad day. 1,200 people came together to save them. That's the power of individuals and informal groups. Cajun Navy is another great example. If you look up the Cajun Navy, they save people from Louisiana floods on a regular basis. And they're an informal Facebook group of people with boats. Guys like, I got a boat. Guys like, I'm on my roof. Guys like, got my boat, heading to your roof. Now here is the question. What if you could choose where to direct your tax dollars? What if you could choose to give some of your money to the alternatives, to the nonprofits, to the companies, to the co-ops that I just talked about instead of the government? Based not necessarily on philosophy, but based on the data. But based on the empirical fact that they will help more people than the government can. What if you could? Well, you're actually kind of supposed to be able to. See, our tax system is supposed to be voluntary. And when I say tax system, I want you to understand that a tax isn't just money the government takes from you and goes into revenue and they spend. A tax is what we generally understand to be that check you write out to take care of society. That's essentially what most people think of when they think of a tax, which is why when you hear, let me throw out a question. When somebody calls you anti-tax and they're on the left, what are they saying about you?
You're a tax person.
Why?
You're anti-poor people.
You're anti-poor people. You're anti-human dignity. It's not that you're anti-tax that's the problem. It's that you're anti the spending of the tax. That is the problem. And so if you show liberals and you show conservatives, look, I'm not against spending the tax dollars. I'm for spending it efficiently. I'm not against helping society. I'm for helping it efficiently and helping it effectively and helping it voluntarily. This is what we call a voluntary tax system. Most major taxes in the United States were actually, and around the world, were imposed during times of war. When I say our tax system is supposed to be voluntary, this is what I mean. The Athenians instituted the aesphora in order to go to war. In the Revolutionary War, the British were paying for the 7 Years' War with the tea taxes and the Stamp Act. The U.S. Civil War introduced the income tax. And World War II, you know that tax is taken out of your paycheck now, directly out of your paycheck? That was supposed to be temporary too. World War II introduced the withholding tax to withhold money out of your paycheck, give an interest-free loan to the government, and then you get your money back at the end of the year, sort of. So outside of the one situation where we're as a society facing death and destruction, you were supposed to be able to help society outside of being forced to. That was the one time where everybody went, all right, we agree, either we're going to get wiped out or you're going to pay a few bucks. We'll rather you pay a few bucks than get wiped out. But it was all supposed to be temporary. We know how temporary it is when we fill out our income tax form every year. It should be, as a principle, absolutely unacceptable to create new victims if the services that are being provided by the government aren't better than what can be provided without the coercive taxation. And for most people on the left and on the right, and even libertarians, especially libertarians, everyone can mainly agree on that sentiment. So what happens if you take that original idea? What happens if you take the lie that the politicians and the IRS were saying about a voluntary tax system? What happens if you actually apply that and you make the voluntary tax system actually voluntary? Well, here are some of the big problems with taxes. It's guaranteed perpetual revenue. And since it's guaranteed perpetual revenue, they're going to get the same amount of money every single year. They can waste it. They can do all kinds of stuff with it. It's a massive concentration of money and power. Now, I'm of the understanding that our Congress is actually rated lower than cockroaches, traffic jams, and Nickelback. And yet, every single year, we give, if you divide our national revenue for the national government into 535 for each member of Congress, we give each of them the authority to spend $7.1 billion. I rate my neighbor higher than a cockroach. I don't trust him with $7.1 billion. Massive concentration of money and power. It disincentivizes quality and social services. If you couldn't lose your job for providing bad service, or you couldn't be penalized for providing bad service, there's no incentive to continue to provide good service. Not responsive to real-world outcomes, you're taxed, and the spending of that taxation really doesn't have that much impact on the tax rate. How many people it helped? A great example, we were looking for comparisons between housing and urban development, which provides affordable housing for poor people, essentially, and Habitat for Humanity, other nonprofits out there that do that. Looking at the comparisons. The government cares so little about how many people they help, they don't even have numbers on it. The official purpose of HUD is to get people affordable housing, to get them out of a rut, to get them out of a bad situation so they can eventually have a house of their own. But they don't have any numbers on how many people that's happened to. They're like, we spent $100 million, what more do you want to know? It increases waste. This year, in late September, right at the end of the fiscal year, the government spent all kinds of money on all kinds of things. The Department of Transportation bought a $20,000 piano. The Department of Homeland Security bought $33,000 in FEMA flags. Who wants a FEMA flag? Oh, wow. Not a lot of takers. The Army spent $30,000 on a basketball hoop. I hope it's gold-plated. It increases waste, and there's a lack of accountability because you cannot choose where your tax dollars go. They take them from you, and they'll take them from you again next year. So what if the system were voluntary, and you could choose exactly where your tax dollars went, even if you didn't send them to the government? What would that do? Well, I'm here to let you know that not only is an idea, but voluntary taxation is here, right now, today. There are 4 main elements of voluntary taxation that are in place today in the United States and around the world, and there's many more options out there that you can look at. But I want to go through 4 main ones. You don't really notice that often. Who knows about this section on your federal tax form? Says, check here if your spouse filing generally want $3 to go to the presidential campaign fund. Who knows about this section on their tax form? A couple of you. Notice how it says it will not change your tax or refund. What does this mean? It means you're taking your existing tax dollars you're paying to the government and you're directing them somewhere else. This is an example of a checkoff. The checkoff is so powerful for government accountability and reflecting the will of the people. Here's what happened with the checkoff. In 1994, when they put it to $3 instead of $1, it raised $71 million. People, yeah, I want mainstream party A and mainstream party B to have more money for their conventions and such. As people's trust in the government and politicians started to wind down, that number went to 39 million in 2012. That directly reflects the opinion of the people on the government. That's what we call representation. That's what we call choosing where your tax dollars go. Yeah, it doesn't allow you to lower your tax liability, but it's a step in that direction, getting to choose where your tax dollars go. Now the hometown tax. Okay, so the hometown tax, probably no one in here has heard of, but it was started in 2008 in order to revitalize Japanese communities. Citizens of Japan can choose exactly where their tax dollars go, not just within the federal government, but within the state government, the regional government, and the local government, and they can choose any project where their tax dollars go. Up to 45% of their tax dollars they can send anywhere to any government at any point. It raised billions of yen per year, 12 billion in 2012, and this is the flexibility of a voluntary tax system, or a move toward a voluntary tax system, is it allowed them to redirect their tax dollars to the Tohoku region when the earthquake hit, so that you didn't have to have the federal government of Japan institute its own FEMA and try to go after it. Saved lots and lots of administration costs. Now, I know many of you can't read Japanese, so I don't expect you to read this. But this right here is a website, private website set up to help citizens learn where their tax dollars go. Well, as the hometown tax started to take off, cities realized, you know, if we provide better service and maybe even a little trinket to people, we could get more tax money. So what you see here is all of these various cities offering sushi and strawberries and swords and trips and vacations, all for you paying your tax dollars to that government instead of another government. If you have a chance, I want you to visit that website either on your smartphone or on a computer. I wish I could scroll through it and show you all the little checkboxes that are available for you to choose exactly how much money you want to give, what project, what cause, what government. It's an amazing website to show your friends about the power of moving toward a voluntary tax system. Now we have the tax credit. We're getting closer, and we're getting closer. The tax credit, unlike who's heard of the nonprofit tax deduction? Deduction for donating to a nonprofit. Okay, so on average, it's about 25 cents off every dollar because it allows you to reduce the amount of money you report to the IRS, not necessarily the amount of tax that you directly pay. What a tax credit is a dollar for dollar, essentially refund, for you giving to another organization or doing something that the government was actually supposed to be doing. Now, there are some tax credits that they stretch this on. But the tax credits we're focused on is when you're doing something the government's supposed to be doing, and you get off of your taxes for that. States that already give tax credits include all of these. But let's give an example. The Arizona tax credit. The Arizona tax credit started in 1997. It was $200. So of the money you owed the state government, you could give up to $200 of that to any nonprofit in the state of Arizona that dealt with low-income people, and you wouldn't have to pay that to the government. You can instead put it in the hands of those more efficient entities we just talked about. Now, it was last year doubled to $400. It's moving in the right direction. Not only was it doubled to $400, but in 2014, when it was still $200, 105,000 Arizona taxpayers took advantage of that credit and sent $28.2 million to nonprofits in the state who serve people better than the government. That's what we're talking about with voluntary taxation. And finally, the most voluntary taxation, if that's a phrase, voluntary contributions. If you look at the bottom of your state income tax form, you'll see a little section on there that says voluntary contributions. These are, and it says, hey, you've already paid all this tax money. You should also give us some more. Please write the amount in the donation box that you'd like to give more to the government. However, 210 such programs in 2002 collected $32.8 million, which means they funded services that people wanted, like military veterans funds, like breast cancer research, like adopted children's homes. They funded services voluntarily on top of their tax dollars. So what happens if you took that success and you applied it to programs you currently pay for with your tax dollars? You applied it to government programs right now. What if when a politician introduced a new tax, you said, raising taxation's kind of hard because it means forcing people a little bit more. Why don't you make it voluntary? Give people the option. Look at the success of that. How could that change the direction? Taxes are going up in this country. They're going up and up and up as the services we pay for get less and less and less. So when a politician suggests that again, why don't you tell them, look at a voluntary contribution. And there's endless possibilities of this. Washington, D.C. was built off of a lottery, a voluntary lottery that the British colonies put together that essentially was a civic duty to perform it and to give to. And some smaller states and smaller governments are starting these voluntary lotteries as well. There's endless possibilities once the principle is the government should have to earn your money. The voluntary tax system should actually be made voluntary. The ideas can flow from there. So now what do? You are getting a preview of the tax revolution that officially launches on Monday. So we're not quite there yet. The media is going to learn about it later. You guys have a sneak peek. But this is the tax revolution. It's divided into two phases. Number one is the idea revolution, and number two is the action revolution. We are now in the idea phase. Ron Paul, if anybody knows who that is, Ron Paul said that we are in an idea war. We are not as much in a legislative war. Most of the legislation he authored never got signed by the president. Yet he started a revolution that to this point, most Republican organizations and think tanks, they now have a Ron Paul influenced person on their board or on their staff. And he now has Amash and Massey, and all these people came after him because he stuck to his principles and he stuck to the idea revolution instead of always trying to win the legislative battle and compromising and this'll pass and that'll pass, etc. We're focused on the idea revolution right now. And when this gets popular enough, and when you guys take this message to your campuses, and when we take this message to libertarians, to liberals, to Republicans, and the ideas are strong enough, we've probably set a number of about 10,000 people that we want to go onto our website and say, yes, this is an idea we want to see implemented in our communities. And when we hit that, we'll launch the action revolution. But since we're in the idea phase, here's what I ask you to do. If you think this is a good idea, if you think this is something you want to support, you want to see in your community, I want you to start asking people this question. What if the government had to earn your money? We found it to be an amazingly powerful question. And since you're in the room, there are cards up here after I'm done talking. We're done with Q&A. These cards have that question on there. It's basically all they have. When you're in a conversation with someone talking about bad government service or talking about how they wish their taxes weren't so high or talking about not helping enough of the poor, hand them that card. That's how you get the idea revolution started. That's how you move the ideas forward. So what are some areas you can look for voluntary taxation? Everybody knows about the dam that just about washed away half of California, right? Right? Okay. So the Oroville Dam would almost washed away about 200,000 people. The Oroville Dam was missing a concrete emergency spillway. It had a dirt one. And the government's running around and they're saying, no, we didn't know about this. This is crazy. Evacuate your house. You have 5 minutes. I hope you get out in time. Yet 12 years before, 3 nonprofits, including Friends of the River, the Sierra Club, and an Upper River nonprofit, warned the government this would happen. So what could you do? Oh, I don't know. Maybe say those guys who did a better job of oversight than the government and saw into the future 12 years, maybe they should handle watching over our dams instead of the government agencies that do it right now. Does that make sense? You guys following where this is going? Or for a single issue, instead of Obamacare, allow people to fund co-ops. So instead of saying, oh yeah, no Obamacare, repeal Obamacare, or repeal and replace it with Hope Magic and the free market, point to actual examples. We have some on our website, taxrevolution.us. Just Google Tax Revolution, you'll find us. That's another way. And then what we need from you, beyond just spreading the ideas, and there's a sign-up form going around if you want to put your name down on there, is suggest examples of non-governmentalities that do a better job than the government. You know of them. They're in your community. They're in your town. They're for-profits. They're non-profits. They're co-ops. Because we need to build an empirical revolution, not just a philosophical one. I don't need you to agree with the ideas of libertarianism to agree with me that feeding 11 people for $1 is better than feeding not even one. And number 3, join the revolution. Go to the website, click on join, sign up there, or sign up on the sheet that's going around here. If you want to chip in, all revolutions take a little bit of money, especially when you're taking on the people who print it. And I want to give a little note on, okay, so I'm 23. I just gave you a talk about taxes. I hope I didn't bore you to death. Why am I involved in a tax revolution? Why am I involved in a revolution whatsoever? 18 years old, I got involved in the Liberty Movement because of a law called the National Defense Authorization Act. Anybody in here familiar with that? Okay. I started PANDA, People Against the NDA, out of my dorm room. We eventually grew to 30,000 people across the country, passed legislation blocking that act from coast to coast. And then I started the Solutions Institute, started training activists, and started teaching people how to hold their government accountable. It took me almost 3 years to start being effective at holding our government accountable. 3 years. It should not in this country take you 3 years having to dedicate your life, your career, 100+ hours a week so you can get enough information and enough tools at your disposal to hold the government accountable. We're supposed to have a representative government. If we're going to have one, it's supposed to be representative of the people that it serves. Having taught, trained activists and seen, I've never been in a single battle where the politicians followed the law. I've seen how dangerous government can be to people. You saw the numbers of people killed by the FDA-approved medicines. You saw the numbers of veterans who died waiting for VA health care. My senior advisor was on a flight back from DC, and the VA, he had gone to the VA to get some blood thinner medicine. And they told him, oh, well, you're not in our system. He's been in the VA system for years. Oh, you're not in our system. He's out of blood thinner medicine. This is crucial medicine for someone to have. Oh, you're not in our system. Go to eligibility. So he goes to eligibility. Oh, our systems are down. We're sorry. We can't find you. He has to fly from DC to Atlanta. Still can't get a VA in Atlanta to give him some medicine. He had to, on blood thinners, flying in a plane is dangerous. They risked my senior advisor's life on the plane to DC not more than a month ago. And this happens all the time. And that's just one area of government. So for me, keeping and holding our government accountable and being able to keep the government from serially abusing people's lives by making the voluntary tax system voluntary, for me, That's what this revolution comes down to. That's why I'm involved, and that's why I care. We're going to go into Q&A, but I want to leave with one quote from President Calvin Coolidge. I favor the policy of economy, not because I wish to save money, but because I wish to save people. The men and women of this country who toil are the ones who bear the cost of government. Every dollar we carelessly waste means that their life will be so much the more meager. Every dollar we save means that their life will be so much the more abundant. Economy is idealism in its most practical form. Thank you guys very much.